Disability ethics.
I have a story about my mother. I'll refer to my mom by her nickname, Sheila. I was a junior in high school when my mother had open heart surgery.
How did you first learn about your heart condition?
If I blockers had 70%, they would be place a ring. So under 70%, they do not place a ring. That's why they did not put a ring and they started putting me on medicine. This event happened in 2012.
My mom had short breaths when we traveled to India for a vacation, and she felt like she couldn't breathe. Because of that event, she went to see a doctor when we returned back to the United States after the summer of 2012. That's how she learned about her heart blockage and how she started her medication.
They first found 2012 my first heart. I'm a heart patient. Then they did not. Later, when I took medicine, they gave me a catheterization and they found that I had 50% blockage. But I started taking medicine. While I was taking them, they didn't a catheterization. They did another catheterization second time. In March, spring break time, and they told me get it done.
This is Disability Ethics. I'm your host, Maisha Wall. In each episode, we will challenge the central question: how do you view disability? What we do in the show is explore the bioethics of disability. In each episode, we investigate the bioethical considerations of disability, and together we will dive deep into concepts. We will struggle with topics of disability that are evident in our lives. This episode, I want to travel back in time. I want to recall with my mother the hardships and pain she had to endure pre and post surgery. Section 1: Chronic Illness as a Disability. Sheila talks about the challenges she faced because of her belief that her heart condition is a disability. Section 2: My Chronic Illness is Who I Am, in which Humaira brings us her story of how her gastritis is something she has learned to live with. Section 3: When Two Viewpoints Clash, discussing both perspectives of chronic illness and looking at the pros and cons of whether it should be considered a disability. Section 1: Chronic Illness as a Disability. My mother was diagnosed with hypertension, more commonly known as high blood pressure, at the time of my birth. She was 29 years old at the time. My paternal lineage has a long history of chronic heart conditions. My mother's uncle died of a heart attack in 1998. My grandfather has had heart surgery and has experienced a total of 4 heart attacks. And now, my mother discovered that she also inherited a heart condition. However, that was not the worst of the news that she had received related to her condition.
They had performed the second catheterization. They found one block had decreased it to going to 30%, but they found another, my left side, and in aneurysm. They call it triple A, aortic aneurysm. So when they found it was 2012. No, it was 2014. Doctors saw this. They said, we have some good news. Your block is decreased, but we also have some good news. We have some bad news. You are diagnosed with an aneurysm. The doctor said that I was close to the danger period because 5.4 a rupture occurs. So my heart is in danger now. Then they said that we now have to perform open heart surgery.
After surgery, my mother applied for Social Security disability benefits in the state of Indiana.
I would always work as a single mom. We were in the middle of our separation,
Sheila's referring to herself and my dad here.
but if I did not have any money, then my lifestyle would be very difficult. That's why I wondered how many more days should I just sit around. Then I applied to disability.
Despite the fact that my mother was unemployed for 2 months and she was not able to lift any object over 10 pounds for 6 months, the state denied her application. It is interesting how my mother considered her chronic illness as a disability, whereas the state did not believe it was so. This raises the question, should chronic illnesses be considered disabilities?
Section 2, my chronic illness is who I am. Before answering this critical question, I want to explore one more case with someone who does not think the same as my mom. First, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Humaira and I'm 21 years old.
When did you first learn about your condition?
I had digestive issues as far as I could remember. So I officially got diagnosed when I was 13, but I definitely had a lot of symptoms way before then. And yeah, it was really a point where that I could not stand the pain anymore. Meals had gotten very problematic, and I kept saying that I had this pain, and it was a time where I was going through a lot of other stuff. So I went through an endoscopy, and I was diagnosed with acid reflux and gastritis, as well as another very interesting like muscular disease that is going on that internal organ. But it's was relatively minor compared to the other two.
Do you remember what like the doctor told you when you learned that you had your condition?
He did ask me a lot of questions about my eating patterns in general, and he told me that that a lot of things in my life in terms of my eating habits need to change, especially for like the first 6 to 8 months. I did follow an incredibly strict diet where I did not consume any like sweets for the most part, coffee, tea, a lot of vegetables and fruits I had to either boil or some sort of like cook in some ways. So I could not eat a lot of raw fruits and vegetables, which I love to eat. So I remember that being a struggle. Milk, for the most part, was also like yogurt, cheese. I had to regulate those a lot. But I think at least what I remember the most is him saying, just like from now on, you have to, um, pay a lot more attention to your body in terms of how you're feeling because, if you're having a strong sensation, that probably means that there's something wrong. And I remember him telling me just avoid pressure at your like belly stomach area at all costs. So it was like no high-waisted pants, no belts. So for almost a year I was incredibly careful about not putting pressure. So I avoided workouts. So it was this like condition of, okay, I need to get better. And I think I had like 4 different pills that I have to take every single day, which was, and I was not good at remembering to take them. So it was like a year of my mom following me behind and saying, okay, you need to take your pills now. And yeah, but like, one thing that I remember is him telling that it's never gonna, completely disappear, but I can learn how to manage it. And, just again, listening to my body, and, it was just like the symptoms will like most likely disappear so long as you don't do anything to trigger them for the most part.
How did your chronic illness affect other parts of your life?
Yeah, to me, I think especially as a kid, not being able to have like the foods that I like now, you have to take care of yourself because you're not going to have a parent, your mom or dad, who is going to say, oh, this is not good to eat for you. You have to, do it just yourself. And, I think it is definitely like a positive aspect of having a sort of a chronic disease is that it's like on you now. So you sort of need to build that inner self discipline about how you regulate yourself. It did have a psychological impact of, my friends would go to like the malls and, there was like, let's go to the food court and get this burger. And I was like, I cannot do that. So it was like one sort of like, there was situations where I felt left out a bit. And other than that, sometimes I would not attend PE classes because it was, again, no pressure. So, like, or at least I sort of tend to do sports where, I knew I would not experience any sort of pressures.
Humaira is my roommate, and I can say that she still has to be very careful about what she has to eat because certain spices can trigger her, which I have to admit, the food that I have cooked for her in the past had done so. Don't worry, I would always feel really guilty and apologize like a million times. However, what I find really interesting is that she does not consider her chronic illness as a disability and does not identify as so, which is contrary to what my mom, Sheila, believes.
The condition, I don't suffer from it at all. And, from outside, I look like a completely able-bodied individual that could do anything. So it's not necessarily a disability at all.
Section 3, when two viewpoints clash. Now, let us revisit a question that we posed earlier. Should chronic illnesses be considered a disability? First, we must define both chronic illness and disability in order to address this question. A chronic illness, 1, does not go away by itself in the span of 6 months, 2, cannot be cured, and 3, will not kill the patient in the near future. There are a variety of definitions for disability, but if we define disability using the medical model, disability is a result of physical impairments in the body. An impairment is any loss or abnormality of psychological, physiological, or anatomical structure or function. Or, in other words, a disability is a result of something that is wrong with the body. According to this model, it is very clear that a chronic illness would be considered a disability. However, even when using the medical model definition of disability, it raises many questions. Even though this definition considers impairments as disabilities, some disability activists think otherwise. Some people within the rights movement sought to differentiate illness from disability. They argue that regarding illness as a disability results in the medicalization of disability. In addition, activists within the movement argue that the medical model is not a great way to define disability. Because some individuals with chronic illness seemingly look able-bodied from the outside, people have a lot of assumptions about chronic illnesses, like how they are at fault for their own condition, and that those with chronic illnesses are not trying hard enough, that they're lazy. Hence, these are some of the reasons why people maintain that chronic illness isn't a disability. Sheila would also tell me the number of times that people would be surprised when she told them that she had open heart surgery, as she looked completely healthy. Despite the fact that my mother looked fine after her recovery process, she was still suffering inside.
But after my surgery, I felt great difficulty because I could not lift luggage. I could no longer do gardening normally. They prohibited me from digging. I could no longer pray normally. I have to sit in a chair. That is a problem. Cooking, my hobbies too. I could not bend to work, pray, or do weightlifting.
What if our assumptions of people with chronic illness are feeding into decisions like who gets disability benefits or not? Well, if we think chronic illness is not a disability, then people who have chronic illnesses probably, by definition, cannot get disability benefits, just like my mom who was denied her benefits. Also, who should make the decision of whether a chronic illness is a disability or not? if people who have chronic illnesses themselves disagree. Nonetheless, it seems like people who do not have chronic illnesses are very biased because of their peculiar assumptions. This is an important consideration because deciding whether to categorize an illness as a disability can impact access and opportunities for people with chronic illness. It affects people's lives in many ways, like employability, which may make it harder for them to find jobs, as they may have a difficult time getting others to understand their chronic illnesses. This barrier extends to not only in the medical profession, but also their social circles, like their friends and relatives, who may question why they still have yet to recover. Do you think it was wrong of Indiana to deny Sheila of her disability benefits? Was Humaira wrong to categorize her chronic illness as not a disability? Who should decide whether a chronic illness is a disability? Do you think chronic illnesses should be considered as disabilities? Until next time. Please subscribe to our newsletter to get updates on the latest episodes. And rate our show so others can find us. Thanks.